Welcome back. It's another episode of Havlicek Stole the Pod. I am your host, Alex Goldberg. With me, as always, is Dr. Justin Quinn and Daniel Donabedian, and we have a special guest, as always, today. It's Gio Rivera of Celtics blog. Gio, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Happy to have you,
Glad to have
and
you.
Always appreciated. JQ, Daniel, what's going on with you guys?
It's been good. I mean, it's nice to finally have the break here. I mean, it's just crazy. We're over 50 games into the regular season. It's almost time for the playoffs.
Yeah, it surely is, and it's feeling more and more like it every day. Dr. Quinn, what's happening with you?
Well, I thought I would use some of that newfound free time to go to the gym at an unusual hour. And oh boy, Mexico City traffic. Oops, bad. No.
Good luck to you. I was just in Houston, speaking of heavy traffic, so very familiar with that. But I am back in Brooklyn, New York, and I am ready to talk about the Boston Celtics and the various narratives that are going on, both for the Celtics and really for the whole NBA. That's kind of what we're going to break down in the second part. There's a lot of pretty wild stories kind of happening all at the same time on a league level. And so we're going to touch base on all of them and how they affect the Celtics at least a little bit. But first, we have to get through the news. Since we last spoke, bad Boston sports day. The Boston Celtics got smacked by the New York Knicks, 111-89. Nikola Vucevic was getting flamed on defense and did not look ready. Jaylen Brown tried as best he could, but got basically no help from anybody on the Celtics roster. And the New York Knicks, to their credit, played a very complete wire-to-wire beatdown pretty much the whole game. Derek White, in particular, really struggled as well. The same day that, of course, the New England Patriots got demolished by the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl. But man, that Bad Bunny show was good. Aside from that, the Boston Celtics rebounded with their last game before the All-Star break, where they walloped the Chicago Bulls with newly acquired Anthony Simons, 124-105. In this game, Nikola Vucevic did quite well. He played excellent off the bench. And Anthony Simons, also now playing well in Chicago, had some interesting stuff to say regarding both his run in Boston and potential future. So let's start there, and then let's break down just what else happened in these games. And Daniel, I think you were the one who was kind of on this Anthony Simons thing. What did he mention as far as his future is concerned related to the Boston Celtics?
I wasn't there for the actual shoot around, but I did see that he kind of was like leaving the door open, which surprised me. He didn't complete. Well, I mean, he's never going to completely say like, "Oh, I hate Boston," or nothing like that. Like he has a good relationship there. I even saw him lurking around the locker room after the win. So when they beat the Bulls, so clearly some good relationships there. But I honestly don't really think he would come back. I feel like that would just be pretty insane to go back to the team that just traded you. And they clearly value
happens,
him.
but
Yeah, I would still just be a little surprised to see him do that and come back to a team where he still isn't going to start. But yeah, it was interesting to hear that I don't think he has any like bad blood with the organization or anything. I think Brad and company were pretty upfront about what could happen.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, listen, you never know with free agency and large trade exceptions, which the Boston Celtics are relatively well positioned for. So you never know. Gio, with these two games, was there anything that jumped out to you? You can go with either one.
Nothing in particular. I think the Knicks one was that's just one of those losses that you're gonna face at any random point throughout the season. I didn't take that and think, oh, this is an issue right here that reflects on poorly on Brad and the Vooch for Simon's trade. I mean, it makes for a good Twitter joke, but aside from that, I didn't look at it as any sort of big deal that reflected on any issue that they have. I just take that as it's going to take a little while to get this guy acclimated. He's a new guy. He's learning a new system. And I think we saw the next game how it sort of fit in. He came in for Cato when Cato went down with a little bit of an injury. It wasn't a big deal, but he only played 15 minutes that night, and Vooch stepped up. So I just take it as, that was more of, Vooch getting acclimated more than anything. I didn't see anything sort of big that necessarily worried me from that loss.
Honestly, the things that jumped out to me in both of these games is that the Boston Celtics are ready for the All Star break, particularly Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and Peyton Pritchard are really ready for the All Star break as they've been carrying a heavy burden. And the Chicago Bulls are ready for this season to be over. Those are the two big takeaways that I pulled off there. Yeah, JQ.
I would add to that double big could be useful in certain situations against teams like Houston with like really big front lines. But we also learned that it can also really not work very well, despite having players that theoretically could do it. So I'll be keeping an eye out to see how much more time Garza gets in the near future. But for now, it looks like he's going to be spending a lot more time on the bench.
Yeah, it will be interesting to monitor the future of this front court rotation. And that's a beautiful segue into Jake Fisher mentioning that there are sources in the NBA that indicate that the acquisition of Nikola Vucevic is a clear sign that one fairly important Boston Celtics front court player, Jason Tatum, is ramping up towards his eventual return this season. Daniel, you have more on the state of Jason Tatum as far as his possible return this season. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so there's, of course, the huge news that he practiced with the main Celtics. Ugo and Amari were part of that practice. In classic Celtics fashion, they just dropped it in a little tweet on their profile. Nobody scooped it. No Shams breaking news. Like, of course, it's just coming right from the word of the Celtics. And I do think that's significant. I don't think it necessarily means like, oh, he's coming back next week. When the All-Star break is over, he's like going to be there instantly. But I do think it's still a big deal. I mean, go back to Kristaps Porzingis last year. Same thing. He went to Maine, practiced with Maine, and then he played a week later. Granted, his injury is different from Tatum. They're not the same guys. Like, then that's not a one-to-one comparison. But still, I think it's a really good sign for him. And as far as the Vucevic connection in that trade, Brad Stevens did say that Tatum coming back had nothing to do with that. Somebody asked him point blank. I forget who. But so I guess you could take that for what it's worth. Brad will usually tell us the truth, but that doesn't mean he's always doing so. But I think all signs are kind of pointing to Tatum coming back at some point soon, maybe March. I don't know. This is obviously speculation still, but there are a lot of positive signs.
Gio, do you have anything that you're thinking about as we approach the All Star break with regard to Jason Tatum and his possible return?
Uh, Nothing really further to add. I don't. I feel like he is going to come back, but I also don't think this is a subject to necessarily be pushing as frequently as it's been pushed throughout the season. Like I think we've seen, not to suggest we wouldn't be better without him because that's insane, but this is a critical sort of career-threatening injury for any athlete, and I think the way he's handled it has been great. Obviously, anytime he posts his shoes on his Instagram story, it gets people going crazy for whatever reason. But yeah, I don't think this is. I think it's just as Brad and Joe have said. We're not going to push him when he's ready. He's ready. I don't. We're in a position where the team has flourished better than any of us could have imagined. Um, so yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
too overly invested in the is he going to come back? Is he not going to come back? I think by the time he does, we'll be fine. And I don't think we should put too much stock into well, if we have him back, we can make a really deep run at it. At the end of the day, we're positioning ourselves for next year more than anything, and this has been a great opportunity for those younger, as Brad said on media day, unproven guys to sort of get their reps in, so that when we get to next year, we can go, all right, you guys have the experience. Now that we have Tatum back, let's figure things out, and we're going to come back stronger than we were before.
Just really quickly on the Vucevic angle, I think a lot of what people, at least according, the Fisher anonymous front office guys are, what I imagine the link is there is that the lack of scoring punch with Anthony Simons heading to Chicago and Vucevic coming in, who's a good scorer, but definitely not a flamethrower in the way that Anthony Simons is.
Independent. He can't create his own. Yeah.
Yeah, not a pure shot creator, more of a secondary connective player. That the logic there is that if Tatum is coming back, he's going to be taking a lot of those shots. He's going to be getting the ball more, and in theory that should make up for the departure of Simons. It's a pretty logical case, and it's one that I think we all kind of felt made a lot of sense in the context of the Vucevic trade to begin with. That being said, I think we've got to take Brad at his word that it's not necessarily a guarantee of anything. And I understand him being reasonably cautious. Despite all that, I do think there's some smoke there, and it's definitely going to be something to watch going forward. Speaking of Boston Celtics that have had some playoff success, really quickly, Holy Cross named their court after Bob Cousy. That's a guy who had a lot of playoff success in Boston, won a bunch of championships with Bill Russell, generally considered to be one of the, 30 best players of all time. Not bad for Bob, and just another quality tribute to his legacy. And then speaking of some stuff that happened kind of related to the Boston Celtics, but not directly, first off, the San Antonio Spurs decided to just outright drop Jeremy Sohan. They released him. It sounds like the decision was mutual. Sohan was not getting much playing time in San Antonio, and I don't think the Spurs particularly wanted to extend him at the price point that he would likely command. He is going to sign with, speaking of, the New York Knicks. So the Knicks have been in a pretty tense matchup with the Celtics all year, grappling back and forth between the 2 and the 3 seed. They've had some really intense competitive games and some blowouts, has to be said. But Sohan is now going to the Knicks. He's going to bolster that bench unit, presumably with some additional defense. How does this affect the Knicks, who also acquired Jose Alvarado at the deadline, and he made a real impact in that game against the Celtics?
This move's especially, I don't know if I see it really being that much of a needle mover. It helps the defense. So, of course, the Knicks want that. I really like the Jose Alvarado move, though. I know that was obviously at the deadline, but when that happened, I was like, dang, they really got him for like that price. I think they walked out with a pretty good deal there. And we saw it against the Celtics. He had a great game. It was his debut game, I think. And he was already doing his classic tip from behind against, I think he got Jaylen Brown on it.
Really quickly about that. Jaylen Brown, my guy, with all due respect, you are having an incredible season. First team All-NBA, absolutely deserved MVP candidate. You have to know that if Jose Alvarado is lingering back for the rebound, he's going to come and poke that ball. That's his main thing. That's the main thing that he does. You got to get the ball out of your hands in that scenario, boss. Anyway, continue.
No, that's true. Any scouting report, you got to know that's going to happen. But yeah, as far as Sohan, I don't think this is too big of a deal. But they're bolstering their defense. They're getting ready for a push, just like the Celtics.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, I feel like the Knicks weirdly have had a lot of scoring punch this year, which I don't think any of us particularly expected given how they played under Thibodeau. But Mike Brown has really reinvented that offense. And now, ironically, the thing that the Knicks have struggled with the most is defense this year. And all of their trade deadline moves indicate that they're very serious about shoring that defense up. I will say, Sohan, to me, doesn't necessarily strike me as a guy who's going to get big minutes in the postseason, but he does strike me as a situational value guy, particularly in situations where the Knicks want to go with defense-heavy lineups. They could potentially trot out Alvarado, Sohan, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson for a just get-a-stop lineup. And man, that would be a team that would be really hard to score against in a lot of different situations. So I think it's a good move. I think it's a low-cost move. There's not really much downside ultimately if he doesn't factor.
There kind of is for Sohan, considering he was looking for more minutes in the first place. It seems a little curious because of that. You kind of alluded to that.
I suppose that's fair. For the Knicks, there's
contract signed,
so yeah, the Knicks could just let him walk at the end of the year, and I don't think they would be particularly troubled. Does have to be said that Landry Shamet is playing a lot for the Knicks right now and has been a big part of their resurgence. We'll see if that continues into the playoffs, but just worth keeping in mind. And then in other Eastern Conference rivals news, I don't know if y'all caught this, but the Charlotte Hornets and the Detroit Pistons do not like each other very much. Jaylen Brown definitely caught this. He said that, among other things, getting mushed in the face is a capital offense in the NBA world, and that is grounds for all sorts of activity, which apparently Isaiah Stewart agrees, as he's getting suspended for 7 games. So is Miles Bridges, or for Bridges is less. It's like 5 games or something
4,
like that.
something like that. Yeah.
And then Jalen Duren and Moussa Diabate are also getting suspended. So 4 suspensions overall for a feisty Eastern Conference clash. How big is the impact on these suspensions for the Pistons and Hornets? And also, I think we all agree, right? This would be an awesome round one matchup, would it not?
Yeah, that was a great game. I mean, obviously, you don't want to see too much on court violence, but every now and then I think it's nice to see some actual
It's a little
fights in the
spice.
NBA because it's just so much of like the jawing at each other and like light pushing. And it's
Mhm.
like cool for like a little clip, but then you're like, okay, no one's actually going to do anything. But
You don't
these
think Joe
teams,
loved it?
oh,
Oh,
yeah,
Joe definitely loves it.
Joe would be in the fight too,
Yeah.
as we saw when he threw Sam Cassell to the side.
That's the real danger. If the Pistons or Hornets get into a matchup with the Celtics, Joe Mazzulla is the most likely person on the Celtics team to get ejected. And yeah, we'll see what happens there. um, yeah, what do we think about these suspensions for the Pistons? Isaiah Stewart, that one kind of caught my attention. That's a fairly significant deal for them.
I mean, they could lose a lot of games. If they have a 5 game, last I checked, lead in the East, I don't think they are in danger of losing first just based on this by itself, but it could screw up the chemistry enough that those problems could linger a couple more games after their return. So we'll see.
Does have to be said that Isaiah Stewart is basically, I think he needs to be a 6 man of the year candidate almost exclusively for rim protection reasons. His scoring numbers, have never been massive, but that guy is one of the 3 or 4 best rim protectors in the league coming off of the bench, and all the advanced stats indicate it. So that's going to be something to watch. The Pistons, a big part of why they've succeeded this year is because they've gotten some outstanding front court play. If those guys are not on the court, could get a little spicy, but I agree. And finally, we should close out the news by mentioning that Chris Paul, as of today, is no longer an NBA player. He was waived unceremoniously by the Toronto Raptors that he was dealt to at the trade deadline after being basically sent home by the Clippers after they acquired him this offseason for what was supposed to be his retirement tour. And now Chris Paul is retired. He just announced it earlier today. He is finished with the NBA. His playing career is over. Is this the saddest retirement tour ever for NBA?
For a player of his caliber, arguably. I mean, shout out to Paul Pierce. I'm glad he no longer has arguably the worst retirement tour because everybody knows that clip with him and Draymond, whatever. That always goes viral every few years. But yeah, I mean, tough for Chris Paul. From a Celtics perspective, I feel like you can't really dislike him that much. I feel like he had a lot of more beef with the Western
Oh, I
Conference.
hate him. That's why I love him so much.
Yeah, he is a guy like that. Just stinks that what happened with the Clippers. However, apparently behind the scenes he was causing trouble, and then when they did let him go, they did rattle off a huge win streak. So I don't know. Maybe he was part of the problem, but stinks either way for him.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
interesting. Gio?
Carmelo Anthony a few years ago, I thought no one can go out worse than
Yeah.
that, and somehow the Chris Paul exit topped it. Uh,
Yeah.
he's a superstar. We'll always remember. It's a really weird situation. We're never obviously going to find out exactly what went on behind the scenes. I thought based on what we saw from him in San Antonio, he had much more left in the tank than I initially imagined at his age. But yeah, I think that might be the most brutal way of any guy I've seen who was a star in like the early 2000s, 2010s, especially one of his caliber, go out.
It's just kind of crazy to think that, that guy was pretty convincingly the best point guard in the league for, I would say, a solid, I don't know, 7 years, something like that, and is a first ballot Hall of Famer, is likely one of the 30 best players of all time. And just for it to crash and burn in the fashion as dramatic, I mean, that's really surprising. I just never would have really expected that. I know his personality has been challenging for a lot of different teams and is arguably probably the biggest reason why he doesn't have an NBA title right now. But it is kind of crazy that it ends with just being waived by the Toronto Raptors after all that. Yeah, will be interesting. Obviously, Chris Paul will not be factoring into the Boston Celtics buyout plans heading into the rest of this season. But shout out to Chris Paul, point guard, great player, really fun to watch, really annoying to play against. I will say this. If there was ever a guy born to be a television commentator for his post-playing career, man, it seems like it's going to be Chris Paul's lane. I would be shocked if he's not on TV very, very soon. Also,
maybe coaching.
Maybe coaching. I feel like coaching. I feel like he could rub some people the wrong way in that regard.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, he would be kind of like the short-term coach, with a coach you hire for a season to get rid of the guys that you don't want on the team anymore kind of coach.
Very interesting. A tank coach. Huh. All right.
Ish.
To weed out the issues. Let's see that.
Yeah. Also, really quickly, we should mention, we talked about the Super Bowl briefly at the top. And speaking of Bad Bunny, Malik Beasley is headed to Bad Bunny's Puerto Rican basketball team while he awaits the ruling on his suspension for the various gambling-related issues that he may or may not be a part of. But we are not able to legally come to a verdict. And so we will just say, hope you enjoy Puerto Rico, Malik. Bad Bunny seems like a great guy. Anyway, let's keep this thing moving. So we have finished the news. We're going to move into the next part of the pod, and that means it's time for the steal. Gio, take this pod. Where do you want to take it? What do you want to talk about?
I don't know about the rest of you. I do my best to suppress my fandom when I'm at the TD Garden for Celtics basketball, but I have no obligation to do that for the Patriots. I'm still recovering from whatever the hell we just watched on Sunday.
Same, man.
So I figured I'd touch base on the offensive line and whether or not it's an overreaction to go, Will Campbell does not belong there next season. I think I have these conversations with a lot of my friends, some of which know much more about football than I do. But, when you watch Drake May and how uncomfortable he was, yeah, there's an element of it that I saw throughout the game where I went, he's a little just overwhelmed by the spotlight in the moment. You saw it in some of those short yardage throws, those targets he was missing where you had guys wide open, had a clear lane for a 20-plus yard gain. But then on a lot of them, he was just getting murdered, and it was just a complete repeat of what we saw at points in the regular season and what we saw especially throughout the playoffs. And a lot of that, as we saw, I think the number was 14 pressures were accredited to Will Campbell. That's dangerous for a guy you have a franchise quarterback. We just saw the previous guy, Mac Jones, how damaging it was, watching him take hits out there, watching him deal with an incompetent coaching staff. Not to say that's necessarily the case here with Vrabel and the guys, but at what point do we decide that could be really detrimental down the line to the guy that we now know is the guy?
Yeah,
Yeah, actually, you go first, Daniel.
I was just going to say, it was my worst fear. We were talking about it, Gio, before the Super Bowl happened. I was like, oh, the offensive line. It was obviously a worry. And then Drake May became the most sacked quarterback ever in a playoff run. Jared Wilson, Will Campbell, it's on them. Drake didn't have his best game, like you said, Gio, but how can you when there's just the threat of you getting just knocked on your butt every single play, just like that? The Seahawks defense is so good. Credit to them. Credit to their entire team. They played a complete game on special teams and on offense, but that O-line was the problem for that whole run, and it just ended with that. And, man, that game was torture to watch. Good thing the halftime show was good, because that game was just terrible. Even when they had, the sort of little hope in the fourth quarter, it got snatched away pretty quick. That was just not a fun experience.
I can offer only my perspective as an outsider. I am, of course, not a Patriots fan. I root for the worst team in professional football. That's right, the Tennessee Titans. Shout out to giving me 26 years of never-ending pain. It's fine. Everything's fine. Yeah, no, thanks for taking my guy, Mike Vrabel, who should probably still be the Titans coach, but it's fine. I'm definitely not mad about it. What I will say is that my understanding is that Will Campbell was injured, was he not? That he was a little banged up and was kind of banged up throughout the entire postseason run. Also has to be said, he is a rookie. Typically, the learning curve for like tackles and guards and really good offensive linemen is pretty steep for the NFL level. It takes them a little bit to get to kind of their final form. I understand you got to protect the franchise, and Drake May, I never want to see your franchise quarterback get sacked a billion times. Cam Ward. But aside from that, I guess my thinking is, to me as an outsider, it feels a little early to jump the gun and say you can't have Will Campbell coming back next year. Ultimately, rookie with an injury playing against the best competition in the NFL in terms of defensive line. I mean, they literally went up against four of the best defensive lines in the postseason. Let's give Will Campbell a little grace, Patriots fans. It could be worse. You could be, starting someone like, I don't know, J.C. Latham at tackle. Thoughts?
I don't have too much to add. I'm not the football guy. Though I will say that pretty much everyone at the restaurant I was at in Mexico City during the Super Bowl was rooting for the Patriots. I still don't get why they are so popular here, given how far we are and how we don't really have a big Mexican population in New England. It's pretty interesting. I'm curious what you guys think about. There was a lot of debate that I was seeing that was comparing the 2022 Celtics versus the Warriors and their youth and inexperience, which they weren't really that inexperienced, to this team. Is that an accurate or a bad comparison in your opinion?
I could see it a little for the Celtics point of view. I mean, if you want to compare the Warriors and Seahawks, no, the Celtics should have probably won against that Warriors team. I think they have the talent edge, and I mean, that was just unfortunate. We all know what happened with that, but the Seahawks were clearly the better team. They were favored. They were better on every side of the ball. That's the only difference. But as far as comparing the Celtics to the Patriots, I could kind of see that where it's this is your first freebie run where you made it further than people thought. And the future's bright. And hey, the Celtics made it back, and they obviously won. So the Patriots have the opportunity to do the same. And Drake May's 23, so there's optimism.
The comparison would be much better suited for the surprise Eastern Conference Finals run that they made Tatum's rookie year. Yep. That feels much closer to kind of where the Patriots are at, where they have this young talent that is really overachieving, and a couple of things broke the right way, and now suddenly they're on a really big stage, but then that veteran experience really makes the difference. Speaking of that young talent, really quickly should mention, just came in from Steve Bulpett, the Boston Celtics home game versus the Philadelphia 76ers on Sunday, March 1st has been moved from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and will now be a national game televised by NBC. I wonder what could possibly be happening on March 1st that would cause that game to be flexed into the national spotlight.
And that's the date.
Well, the 76ers are much better lately,
right,
or something.
Exactly.
That's the date I picked when we were talking about it.
That's very interesting. Something to watch, something to consider. Anyway, Gio, any other thoughts on the New England Patriots before we move into the next chunk of the pod?
Yeah, I didn't think about it until you mentioned it. I think the comparison to the Tatum rookie dunking on LeBron is a better comparison. I think a lot of people are sort of pushing it more toward the 2022 because when you win you didn't win the MVP, but when you're in contention and should have won the MVP, thank you. It kind of I don't know. I feel like this run kind of pushes you a little more ahead in terms of experience than say that Tatum team did for them. I think that's just naturally how football kind of goes.
It's faster.
But I think that comparison is much better suited. I think at the very least maybe they should consider shifting Campbell a little bit. I'm not on the boat of completely give up on him. You did use him with your 4th overall pick because Gerard Mayo was an idiot and decided not to tank that final game, but that's beside the point.
And now the Titans have Cam Ward as a result. Let's go. Anyway,
But yeah,
God.
that's just brutal. It's just I still struggle with the balance of people going, well, he needs to learn to throw the ball in that situation, get rid of it. Sure, even if he was as perfect as can be in those situations, he's still getting mauled out there to a brutal
Yeah.
degree where you're like, I don't know if he's going to make it out alive on this field. It's that bad.
Yeah, that is true. Just watching the game, it was pretty clear midway through the second quarter. I think it's like, oh, the offense just does not have it at all. They are getting demolished. Well, so let's move back into NBA world. Despite a brief football detour, we will of course continue to talk about any and all New England sports. Red Sox, please do something. Anyway, uh, so there have been a lot of storylines that are taking up airspace now with the All-Star break, of course, looming. You know, this is a time for no games are being played, so it's time for narratives and media to kind of run wild with what's happening. And really, there have been three stories that have kind of taken up a lot of airspace lately. The first related to gambling, the second related to tanking, and the third related to expansion. And we're going to kind of jump into all of those. We'll start with the gambling piece, though. So the big story here is that Giannis Antetokounmpo was heavy speculation for trade rumors basically all year as soon as it became clear that the Milwaukee Bucks were not heading anywhere relevant for this postseason. There was tons of speculation from Shams and from all these different sources that the Bucks were open to moving Giannis at the trade deadline. And then, spoiler alert, nothing happened. Giannis is still a Milwaukee Buck. All of these conversations are going to get pushed to the summer. And while this is not necessarily an outcome that we couldn't have anticipated, I think all three of us at some point kind of came to the conclusion that it would be pretty hard to move Giannis at the deadline. What's interesting as far as wrinkles go for this is that Giannis announced right after the trade deadline was over that he was partnering with Kalshi, which is a odds. It's basically a website for anybody who doesn't know. There you can. It's a prediction market. You can bet on different outcomes for everything from will Giannis get traded to who will the next president be to will Jesus Christ return this year. That is literally odds for everything. So Giannis announced his partnership with a speculative future odds market that you can place bets on. And he did this right after the trade deadline when a lot of people were on Kalshi and Polymarket making bets on will Giannis be traded. And some of them were saying, yes, he's going to the Heat, or yes, he's going to the Warriors. They put a lot of money on that. And then he stayed. So we got to talk about this. I am personally going to say that I am very distressed by this development. It does not feel like a good precedent for where player movement and the NBA's gambling relationship is headed. But I want to open the floor to y'all. Gio, you go first. What are your thoughts on this?
I couldn't agree more with you. And in a time where it's hard to trust the government or just about anything, I mean that couldn't be a worse look. I Daniel could probably tell you anytime I mention Kaushi, I can't even get the name correct. I call it Kalishi, Kalashi. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's just the timing of it was horrible. It's just Giannis every time. I've been frustrated with him for the past few years of being the guy who every year ends up in I'm out of here rumors, but when he's in front of a microphone talking to reporters, that energy is not the same as it is when Shams is putting out reports or anyone else. I myself personally am not a gambling guy. I try to mitigate any sort of outlet for addiction that I possibly can. Um, and I agree. I think this sets a terrible precedent for the NBA. I saw a lot of people comparing it sort of to LeBron doing DraftKings commercials, which I don't
Mm.
really care that much
Is
about.
it
I don't
changing
think.
the outcome of bets when he does them? I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like I don't know. Everyone dumps on LeBron any chance they get, but
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible, terrible look. The timing of it, especially, I'm not going to stop saying it, was just awful. And I don't know. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It's kind of hard to trust that the league and Adam Silver are doing everything within the league's best interest, especially when you have the stuff coming out with Rozier and Billups and all that sort of stuff, and all of a sudden we have a superstar now who has like the clean, great guy image, and he does what looks like to be the most corrupt, just sort of gross thing you can possibly do using your all possible leverage from your personal situation to sort of gain financially, I think it's awful.
Additional thoughts here, folks?
I think that it is a really big risk for the NBA and for professional sports more generally, just because of the fact that for one perspective on the whole Giannis thing, it could easily look like he was intentionally manipulating the markets the whole time for a kickback, right? And once that kind of cynical vibe settles in on something that literally has the legal possibility of creating just like an absolute fireball of scandal that could damage the league profoundly for years, if not decades, it just seems wildly reckless. There is a place for pro gambling, like legitimized sports betting, for exactly the reasons we do know about Rozier. I think it is actually, contrary to some people's opinions, better because they actually caught this happening, and we know that this was happening in the past. There have been point shaving scandals that have been caught that have caused, in and of themselves, would be much less significant than something like this becoming more entrenched. It's just to me, it shouldn't be so visible, gambling. It shouldn't be so cynical. It shouldn't be so accessible. It should just exist. There can be commercials. You go do your thing, but I shouldn't see things in the middle of a broadcast asking me, never mind like the breaks, but in the broadcast asking me to place bets. It's gotten to be too much.
I'll jump in here and say that to me, it feels like this problem is both very much affecting the NBA and also much bigger than the NBA broadly. I, for one, have been really dubious about these kind of prediction market stuff for a while. Feels like there's a very obvious negative financial incentive there where, like for presidential elections or for things like that, artificially boosting or dropping stories about, candidate X, Y, or Z, or, making like the fact that Polymarket is, like basically treating itself like a news aggregator online with a pretty clear intent to influence betting markets. This just reeks of yet another aspect of kind of disinformation for financial incentive, which is having some pretty profoundly negative effects on a lot of things in human society generally. And all this is to say, um, I think this is an obvious area where there is going to be further malfeasance if there isn't corrective action taken by the NBA. But I also think while it is a bad look for Giannis, and while it is, I think definitely like a strange thing to happen, I also think it's entirely predictable because the league has put in no safeguards on this. They don't appear to be planning to do any safeguards on this. If anything, they're only getting further and further involved in gambling revenue partnerships and prediction partnerships. That kind of seems like it's a huge financial cash cow for the league. And I think it's going to be, I think you're going to see more of this heading into all sorts of different, free agency and trade periods, unless the league steps in and takes corrective action. But in order for that to happen, there's going to have to be a significant reckoning in terms of financial incentive structure for league partners. Speaking of which, it just should also be mentioned that we might be seeing some consequences of financial incentives for league and or player partners coming soon related to the Los Angeles Clippers. We're just keeping our tabs on that one. More to come, presumably. Pablo Torre finds out. Good episode. If you haven't listened lately, just go check that one out. Daniel, any further thoughts on this?
I agree with all of you guys. I'll just say, like, the lines are becoming so blurred between the NBA and, like, all these betting sites. Like, LeBron's representing DraftKings, now this whole Giannis Kalshi thing. There was the Shams draft thing with Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson a few years ago, if you guys remember that, where he might have affected the line purposely or not. And then expansion, we very likely have a team going to Vegas. Like, that's just even more issues. That's going to be a bad look when they're promoting that on all the broadcasts. And like Justin said, like, it's even on like the NBC Sports Boston broadcast. Like, it's just everywhere. And Adam Silver hasn't really crack down on much in his tenure as commissioner, and the time might be soon because it's just getting way too prevalent.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about expansion and the consequences of that in a bit. But first, before we get into that, we do have to address another area of controversy and great frustration amongst a number of NBA fans. So it's that time of year, everybody, everybody's favorite time of year, when tanking discourse comes back. The Utah Jazz and the Indiana Pacers were both fined. The Pacers were fined $100,000, and the Utah Jazz were fined $500,000 for potentially resting players down the stretch of games in the fourth quarters, with an obvious incentive to keep losing so that they can get a higher draft pick in what everybody expects is going to be a really heavy, loaded top four draft. And both of those teams, with the pick protections on their first round picks being what they are, have perhaps even more of an extreme incentive to lose basketball games at this time. With all of that in mind, of course, we're once again back on tanking discourse time. We're always going to be on it. Also, the Jazz shut down Jaren Jackson for the year, has to be said. So
legitimate problem.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure it needed to be worked on at that particular moment, but they do have a, pardon the phrasing, leg to stand on.
Will Hardy said as much, and he also mentioned as much with regard to Larry Markkinen, who apparently is nursing an injury. But suffice to say, we are not going to be free of tanking discourse anytime soon. Bill Simmons and Nick Wright went off on it in their latest podcast, which I was listening to on the plane. It's going to be on Zach Lowe. It's going to be on every single NBA national podcast. The tanking discourse is coming. So I would pose this as a question. One, is tanking that big of a deal? Is it something that we need to spend every year, multiple months talking about as it gets worse every single year? Is this a systemic league-wide problem, or is this just something that is part of the league forever and that maybe could use a little tweaking, but ultimately will not go anywhere?
I mean, I don't know if it's a huge issue to be talking about every year, but I guess it kind of does relate to just the regular season continually being undervalued either by teams or fans. And that's obviously a problem for the NBA because they want to promote the regular season, every single game as being important. And they've kind of tried to fight that with the in-season tournament. As far as from what happened with the Jazz, I mean, we don't know all the details, but like Justin was saying, I think some of the injury stuff was legitimate. Maybe the timing was pretty bad, but their owner was on Twitter like fighting with Bobby Marks about it. So it's going to be a hot topic still in the NBA. But in terms of the issues the league has, I don't know if it's near like the top three.
Gio, what do you think?
I'm going to go. Yeah, you go ahead, Gio. No, go ahead.
I think it's kind of similar to how I view the Giannis gambling thing. Like tanking is a part of, sports for better or worse as we see it. I think it's more so how egregious it can get. I don't know how legit the injury situation necessarily is in Utah, but I just thought it was a really bad look when you're up, 15 going into the fourth quarter against Orlando, and you sit all your guys, and that final shot was just disgusting. And then you put the camera toward their bench, and they're just smiling, celebrating like they just secured the 1 seed in the West or something like that. It's just the way you go about it to me more than anything. If you have a team that just legitimately stinks, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. I understand why teams do it, but I also don't think it could be so in your face to, the viewers of the game, the fans in attendance, like, yeah, we really don't care about this game and we're going to show you how much we don't care. Once it gets to that point, that's where I find it to be a problem. And yeah, I mean, it's one of the several situations where I see Adam Silver kind of showing up late to sort of addressing. I didn't think he was going to find them the way he did. That impressed me. But I also think it's one of these things we got to hammer right now and not, be late to the party and addressing it.
I don't disagree. I do think that, I think it was Fred Katz maybe on the recent Low Post talking about this, where there are already rules in place that can be used, that were used in the case of the Jazz. I'm not entirely sure, unless they are very aggressive on a game by game basis using those rules to find teams. Because one or two or three of those fines, even as big as they are, do not compare to the hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue landing one of those top players will bring to your franchise over time. So it's really just the cost of doing business at that point. They can do other things to increase the incentive to win at the end of the season. I love Ryan Bernardoni's concept of tombstone wins, which is basically just that you get more bites of the draft apple by winning past a certain date. The ideas of removing pick protections been discussed ad nauseum. Maybe that might work. Maybe it might open up other things. Why don't they move the midseason tournament to the end of the season? So that way, to win it, you have to be playing good at the end of the season. Just an idea.
Yeah.
All told, though, the crux of this is the whole incentivization of the draft being what it is, and the fact that we love trades, we love the draft, and we love hope, and we don't want to get rid of any of those things because those are some of the things that make NBA fandom very distinct and very loyal. So I don't buy any of this like pearl clutching. I do buy that it needs some work because it is, as Alex pointed out in a recent chat, that this many teams tanking this egregiously, it is a problem. But it's a problem that I think needs to be fixed very, very incrementally and delicately to avoid creating a whole new set of problems.
Well, I'm going to counter by instead coming in with a really aggressive, very insane and silly fix that could actually work. This was proposed by my dear friend Evan, who was a former guest on this podcast when we talked about our greatest Celtics villains episode in, I want to say August or September. And Evan is an ideas man above all else. He has a plan for how to prevent tanking through sheer humiliation, which I think is worth mentioning. So his plan is as follows. First, it requires returning to original lottery odds. So the number one pick or the worst record has a 25% chance at the number one pick. The second worst record has a 20% chance, and so on and so on. But you cut those odds in half and brace it not just on your win-loss record, but on the following metric. Half of those odds, i.e. half of 25%, so half of the worst record. So basically, you could get 12.5% odds at the number one pick by having the worst record. And then on top of that, the other half would go to having the best point differential of all lottery teams. So how this would work effectively is that, say the Sacramento Kings, they have the worst record. They would have a 12.5% chance at the number one pick plus a 0.6% chance, or plus an additional 6% chance as they have the second worst, or sorry, a 0.6% chance as they have the second worst point differential amongst lottery teams. What this would do is effectively incentivize teams to try hard to keep games competitive, but still lose them. And this would lead to some truly ludicrous NBA scenarios wherein, say, the Dallas Mavericks have, a chance to lose a really close game. Like they're fighting tooth and nail to get the point margin within 4 points. But then in the last 30 seconds of the game, Jason Kidd has to find a way to lose the game anyway. It would increase the watchability of the games dramatically, and it would force truly absurd scenarios, such as the Pacers are inexplicably up 2 and they need to lose with 30 seconds left. How are they going to find a way to lose this game? It would be an absolute mockery. It would be a complete perversion of NBA win incentive. And it would also be really funny. And I think it would, through sheer humiliation, curb a lot of tanking efforts, because who on earth would want to be in a scenario where you have to intentionally lose a really close game in the final 30 seconds or so? It's got some legs to it. It's absurd and crazy, but it's got something to it. I want to mull on this idea.
The point differential, I love the point differential idea. They do need to explore ways to incorporate something like that into solving tanking if they're going to get funky with it. I do think that the draft odds part though is a non-starter. That's just never going to happen. But the point we've seen what it can do in the play-in tournament. I would be really curious to see the ways they could incorporate that. Let's definitely keep tabs on that as an idea. I really like that.
Is
Any
Evan
additional thoughts?
I didn't get to meet Evan because I don't think I was on that episode. But is Evan a sicko? Because this sounds like a
Oh,
basketball
he's a
sicko.
sicko.
Yeah,
Yes,
this is
he's
a basketball
he's a
sicko.
sicko in so many levels. I love him to death. One of my dearest friends of my entire life, and he's an absolute maniac.
I like the point differential though, like Justin said, because like at least for like the Celtics games, like that game against the Bulls, it's over by like second quarter. Like it's after that, it's not very
Right.
entertaining. The Bulls don't really care. They're throwing out an all guard lineup, like, but maybe hey, if point differential mattered, we'd get a little more action even later in the clock too. And the NBA definitely tried to do that with the play-in tournament. I don't know how much that's worked, but I would be in favor of seeing that more frequently during the regular season.
Somehow that model can make. I can see a situation where watching like Celtics and Pistons, I can pass a little bit on to tune into like two tanking teams going back and forth, and it's something I never would imagine I'd say
Right.
ever till the day I die. But somehow I'm in on it. It's, at
That's
the end of the
true.
day,
That's true.
make basketball more watchable. I'm kind of a little bit in Missoula's boat, like when he said last year. I don't watch a whole lot of games that aren't Celtics because a lot of them are genuinely boring. But hell, I'm on
It
board with
would
that.
certainly it would certainly make things more watchable. I can already imagine a pitched battle between the Wizards and Nets to out Washington Generals one another and achieve increasingly bizarre ways to lose a close game, which would be really funny. For context, that Evan has run the numbers on this. He was deep into the weeds last night on how this is going to work. The teams that this would most reward right now are the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, and the Dallas Mavericks, who are still kind of vaguely trying to win games, but they're at least competitive in their losses. They just don't have a lot of talent. The teams that would be most punished are the Utah Jazz and the Chicago Bulls, who are intentionally selling and getting
Fair.
blown out, which I think
Yeah.
is reasonable. You want to reward teams that are actually trying and are, kind of competing in these games, as opposed to the Jazz and the Bulls, who are largely bringing shame to the sport for their shameless selling efforts. So this could be one unique and unconventional fix, courtesy of Evan. I think we got to run this one. We're not going to spoil it now, but we have a guest coming on next week that I think we got to run this idea by and see if we can run this thing up the ladder to the national media, because I can already think of a few national media folks who would be intrigued by this. Anyway, enough of that. So we'll conclude with a topic that, I guess we have two more topics, but this is kind of the bulk of it. Um, so the big thing that this all ties into is that the expansion rumors are back in a big way. The NBA is planning on voting for expansion. Do we know the date yet? Soon.
Off the
Next
top of
board
my
of
head.
governors.
Yeah, the owners are planning on voting, and it sounds like there is actually, despite the Jim Dolan holdout group, there is some real momentum towards this. As always, Seattle and Vegas are the rumored expansion teams, and this, of course, triggers an expansion draft were this to happen, in which teams are going to have to protect players, and some of those players are going to be available to be drafted. I don't think we need to necessarily talk about the where and why for Seattle and Vegas. We've kind of done that to death, and it's pretty clear that those would be the two teams if they were to expand another two here, as much as I'm sure Dr. Quinn would love to see a Mexico City professional basketball team.
Things are just not right politically. I'll leave it there.
I think that's probably fair. But how might an expansion draft affect a team like the Boston Celtics, who have a decent amount of talented players? Typically, for expansion drafts, it's going to be 7 or 8 players that a team is allowed to protect. In this case, we're going to go with 8. Celtics can protect 8 players in an expansion draft. And so, with that in mind, I guess I'm curious. Let's go around the horn. Who would you protect and why? Just really quickly. Let's start with you, Gio.
As far as toward the end of the rotation, guys, I mean, there's the obvious ones that you would hold on to, but
Right.
I've been especially impressed with the development of Jordan Walsh, it would be really tough for me to see him go. But I feel like he'd be one of the first guys that would enter the conversation.
Get snatched up.
I
Yeah.
think his development has been tremendous from a defensive perspective, but also from an offensive perspective. A lot of talk when you know the C's took him out of Arkansas was purely defenses, and seeing him sort of take over some of the games that during the early portions of the season played a big effect on getting this team established and ramping up their development to a speed that we didn't necessarily imagine heading into the year. I have a lot of faith in their ability to sort of develop a replacement if that time ever came. I think we've seen that with a lot of the guys, especially this season, what their coaching staff and their system from a developmental perspective sort of can do to players that we don't think can deliver the impact that they have been. But just off the top of my head, I think losing Jordan Walsh we'd really feel that.
So just to be clear, also let's just really pause this and say, I think we all agree Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, Emias Queta, Sam Hauser, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum. Those guys are all protected, right? Just to run really quickly through it. Pritchard, Hauser, and Queta are all wildly outplaying their contracts. Those are incredibly valuable guys that you need to keep on the team for financial flexibility and just for quality of play.
If we were saying this season, definitely agree. Seeing as this would probably not be for at least a season or 2 seasons, the roster would probably look pretty different. Some of these guys might be in the last year of their whatever. They might be older. So this could change depending on when. But yeah, totally agree for now.
And then for Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, I mean, those are the 3 best players on the team. They're the core. You're not going to move on from those guys. Those guys are protected, I think, for fairly self-explanatory reasons, right? So really what we're looking at is protect 2 of Baylor Shireman, Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, Luka Garza, Amari Williams, and Nikola Vucevic. So Daniel, I'll swing it to you. Of those guys, Gio mentioned Jordan Walsh would be one of the players that he would want to protect. So pick one player that you would like to protect amongst this group as well.
Yeah, just looking at this list, I mean, like Justin said, if you factor in it being in the future, I guess you can kind of rule out Nikola Vucevic. Like, we don't really know what's going to happen with him, the contract, and he's 35 years old. But at the moment, maybe you keep him just because you gave up Simons for him. I agree with Walsh's argument for that Gio gave. I like that. It's really split for me between Ugo and Baylor Shireman. This is kind of a tough one. I would just say in terms of pure youth, I'd go keep Ugo and give up on Baylor. But I will say
Baylor's really good, but he's probably not developing too much more.
Yeah, he's been awesome this year. But I still feel like if you compare him and Hauser, I don't know how much more he's going to give you than what Hauser is currently capable of. And the whole contract situation you mentioned, Alex. And yeah, Ugo's young, still has a lot ahead of him. Not to say Baylor doesn't either, but I think Ugo has more upside, and he's shown it on both ends of the floor. And what is he, like 19? Or he just turned 20? Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to go with him.
JQ, anything?
The only thing I would add, those are the guys I would go with too, Ugo and Jordan. And Jordan in particular, and one thing in my mind really stuck out when I saw him defending Victor Wembanyama. We need a player like him on the team in case they end up facing very reasonably San Antonio in the finals, and for regular season matchups, obviously also. He obviously does a lot more than that, but the fact that he was able to competently defend in short spurts, one of the most difficult to defend people on the planet in terms of basketball, I would be very unhappy about losing a player with those capabilities.
Yeah, for me, Ugo is a must keep. His advanced metrics are just outrageous, and the fact that he is already that much of a plus minus, on off demon, that just feels like a guy you have to keep, especially on a rookie contract. The question would come down to Baylor versus Jordan Walsh for me, who are both having very good seasons. I think Jordan Walsh has kind of been his minutes have been a little bit spottier lately as far as consistency in the rotation. It kind of seems like Joe is leaning a little bit more towards trusting Baylor in those moments. But I do think the age piece, the kind of long term potential of Jordan Walsh developing, if he kind of expands his offensive game, there's a chance that he could blossom into a really terrifying player. He feels like the higher upside pick, whereas Baylor to me feels like kind of the safer, more like bankable. This guy will be a rotation player pick. To me, it's 50-50 between those guys. I think you can make a pretty credible argument for both. With apologies to Luka Garza, Amari Williams, and Nikola Vucevic. Those guys are having, I think Garza in particular is having a very nice season. The reality is just that, he's probably of all of the players that are significantly in the rotation, aside from Vucevic, he's probably the odd man out here just for both, financial reasons, age curve reasons. And, it has to be said, protecting 8 players doesn't necessarily mean that the players that you don't protect will be picked. There is a world in which, none of these guys get picked, or only, 1 or 2 of them gets picked. I imagine if Walsh or Shireman were available, there's a good chance that somebody is picking them up for their rotation, just as a low key, quick acquisition, low cost and potential talent. But, there's an argument for example, not protecting someone on the basis of, we don't think this guy is necessarily going to get picked. And I think you could definitely make that argument with like Vucevic, for example, 35, getting older, a good player, but not necessarily someone that like a young expansion team would want to build their franchise around. So something to be said. Yeah, I think for me, that's the choices between Walsh and Baylor, but we'll see. These things are yet to come. The expansion vote has not happened yet. It has not been finalized. This is merely speculation. We will conclude with this. So it is the All-Star break, which means the All-Star game is happening. You can probably tell by my tone of voice that I'm not necessarily super excited for this. There's been
anyone?
many attempts.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. There have been many attempts to fix the competitiveness of the All-Star game, from letting the players draft their team's pickup style to the Elam ending to whatever the abomination of last year was, and now here we are with Team USA and Team USA versus Team World and Team bunch of other guys, and they're all playing round robin quarter thing. Guys, is this cooked? Like, is it just over? Are we just never going to have a good All-Star game?
It's not a real game. So 2 10-minute halves, they play however hard they freaking feel like it. We all say this is boring, and then we move on. And they can put all the energy to making the side events more interesting. Have like an unrivaled 3-on-3 thing. Have like one-on-one tournaments. Just be creative, experiment there, but just keep the stupid All-Star game 15, because it's there's more players in the NBA now, more players on teams, versus 15, and they can play however hard they want to for 10 minutes for each half. Done.
Does it even matter if we fix the All-Star game?
Not really.
I mean, just looking at it the NFL side, like the Pro Bowl is completely fallen to the wayside. So I guess you don't want to see that happen to the All-Star game. But as far as this idea, the world's idea, the T versus USA,
it's insane.
This idea is cooked. Like the fact that the NBA has to put out like 5 different explainer tweets, like this is the format, they play then, this is what happens next when they advance, like it's getting way too complicated. Like the average fan is not going to keep up with this or even know what's going on, and that's a huge issue. But I think what makes it even worse is when you look at the side events, which should be also another highlight. The dunk contest is a complete joke this year. They got Jackson Hayes, who is arguably the most notable player, which is just a crime. I think like Jace Richardson was in it too. I'm blanking on the other guys, but like this is just a terrible field. And since Jaylen Brown competed in it, I feel like they just really haven't had any star power in the last 3 years, and that's a big issue. The dunk contest was like the marquee thing, and now
the other guys are who? That's what the fans will be saying. Who?
Yeah, exactly.
All the VPs from the Players Association.
All I'll say is,
Wait, I'm gonna look up the place.
The All-Star game is fundamentally for kids. Right? That's what it's all about. That's the main attraction. And if the kids like the All-Star game, the NBA has succeeded, whether the players compete or not. What I will say is the pickup style felt like the last time we had a competitive All-Star game, when we had LeBron drafting one team and Kevin
It's
Durant
fun.
drafting the other team. That
The
was
draft
fun.
isn't bad.
I understand that, Rudy Gobert and James Harden got mad about it because of where they were picked. But guys, come on. You're NBA All Stars. You're making $1 zillion. Respectfully, stay mad. It's not that big a deal for an exhibition game. The fix for the All Star game, if there is a fix, is go back to pickup style East versus West. That just doesn't seem like it's that big of an ask. And if the game's not competitive, guess what? It's an
No one
exhibition
cares.
game. No one cares. Anyway, we'll close things out with that. Also, of course, congratulations to Jaylen Brown as Celtics All Star. My guy, good job. Please just be aware of Jose Alvarado. All right, we'll close out with this per usual, something to remember or something to forget. Gio, we'll model how this goes, but you can talk about basketball. You can talk about what you had for breakfast this morning. You can talk about the Boston Celtics. You can talk about the Patriots. Whatever you want it to be, something to remember or something to forget to close out this episode. But before we do that, where can we find your work?
Celticsblog.com. I write post game stories, columns every week, a few feature stories. So I'm there all the time. On Twitter at GOJ Rivera. That's where you can find me, find my work. Same at Blue Sky. So that's where I'm at.
Nice. JQ, where can we find your work?
You found it. Please keep coming back to wherever you're listening or watching this, or that whole Celtics Wire place. And yeah, Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, same for me. Celtics Wire, listen in right here, and Clutch Points, or just see me on Twitter. Pretty active at DanielD1214.
And you can find my work streaming on any music streaming or podcast streaming platform. It's here. It's also at Divine Sweater, the rock band that I am in. If you would like to listen to that, it's pretty fun. And you can follow me on Blue Sky or Instagram if you would like, where I will be posting about, well, all sorts of different fun things. Anyway, we will conclude with something to remember or something to forget. I will get things started. I need to remember that Houston traffic is real bad. And if I'm leaving Houston to get on a plane to go back to Brooklyn, I need to factor in 2.5 to 3 hours rather than 2 hours to get through the airport. Made it. I'm here, but it was a tight one. Justin?
I'll go next. Yeah, keeping with that whole traffic theme that we have kind of lacing through the start and stop of this episode, I'm going to remember to keep being unexpectedly nice to people when we're all pissed off in traffic and letting people go ahead of me who clearly have been frustrated and stuck in a lane forever and are clearly trying to not get out of it, because those fleeting moments of solidarity can make those really fun situations almost tolerable.
Daniel?
Yeah, for forget, I looked up the other contestants. I'm going to forget this dunk contest. We got Carter Bryant, Jackson Hayes, Jace Richardson, and Kashad Johnson. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I mean, come on. Like, not even somewhat more informed NBA fans know who these guys are. And then,
Just have pro dunkers like jump in and take over and embarrass the NBA into feeling some real people.
yeah, they're
No
definitely
offense,
these.
Jackson Hayes.
Yeah,
So,
bring that
so,
Messiah guy who does street ball in New York City.
yeah,
True.
I've seen that. And
All right,
then
yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say something to remember. Joe Mazzulla's appreciation for all the employees around TD Garden, because I don't think I've ever quite seen that from a coach. He has worn this Boston Bull Gang sweatshirt to the pregame pressers for like the last week or
Seen
so.
it.
And that's what all the guys wear who switch out the parquet for the rink and vice versa, because obviously the Celtics share TD Garden with the Bruins. And I just thought him talking about that, saying it was a gift and how he wears it to appreciate them, was pretty cool. And he's just done a good job in his tenure of always shouting out the people who are behind the scenes that otherwise us in the media and maybe fans and stuff would never really see.
Love it.
All right, Gio, close us out. Something to remember, something to forget. Could be about anything and everything.
something to remember, Craig Breslow is a fraud. And to any Red Sox fan who's demonstrating any ounce of optimism, I will mute or block you immediately on Twitter. I've been sick of it since the Mookie Betts trade, and I'm tired of seeing it every time I log on. This team is incompetent. They have no intention to contend. And if you choose to buy into whatever the hell they're doing, you are just willfully not a smart person, to word it lightly.
Roman Anthony, we are so sorry. You don't deserve this.
No, something to forget. Will Campbell. I'll do my best.
And with that, we will conclude another episode of Havlicek Stole the Pod. We'll check back in with you next week with some exciting new guests and all sorts of fun things to talk about. Until then, enjoy the All-Star break, whether that means watching the NBA All-Star game or doing something else with your time. Both are acceptable, and we'll talk to you soon.